Hi, Casie.
Hi, Stanley.
Thank you for asking me to interview you for this. I'm honored that you chose me.
Couldn't have been anybody else.
Well, before we start getting into the Waco case, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm born in Louisiana, home of Louisiana. Formative years in South Mississippi. Graduated from high school in 1991, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Really small town, and I knew pretty early on that I needed a big city. Like I liked what I thought I knew about anonymity. Those small towns, everybody knows everybody's business, and I was just looking forward to going someplace where you could blend in. So I came to Texas in '97. Yeah, not from Texas, but got here as soon as I could.
So, where'd you go to law school?
I did both my undergrad and my law degree at the University of Houston. Took me about 10 years to get my undergrad because I'd stop and start. But by the time I graduated, I knew that I wanted to go to law school. So I graduated in May, and then in September of 2001, I started my first year of law school.
At some point, you did some work with the Houston Women's Center.
It was Aid to Victims, AVDA, Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse. And that was, I guess, sort of where the legal bug really took off with me.
In what way?
Well, so we had a legal advocacy project, and we provided low-income women legal services, protective orders, divorces, SAPSERs, and we also, at the same time, we had a program for batterers, for men, right, to help them stop hitting their wives. And I think that was the first time that I saw a disparity in what justice looks like, and inextricably linked to money.
So when did you become a lawyer?
I got licensed. I took the bar twice. First time that I took it, I missed it by one question, which was kind of insulting, but took it again. So I didn't start practicing until May of 2005.
Okay.
And like most solo practitioners, I did everything. Personal injury. I had some oil and gas in-well servicing companies. But it didn't take me long to really hone in on just doing criminal defense work.
Why?
So when I was in law school, I thought I wanted to go work for the ACLU. Just because I was very active in the gay rights movement, and I saw, firsthand, both in Mississippi and in Texas, how civil rights were supposed to be for all, and it wasn't happening. And so I realized then that the ACLU, I think, hires, 3 lawyers every year, and they don't really litigate anything. And it was a law school professor of mine that said, you want to do constitutional work, that's in a courthouse, that's in a criminal courthouse. Like, that's where the Constitution affects real people. And so it was this sort of convergence of what I'd seen at AVDA, with justice looking way different for people with money, and wanting to do civil rights work.
So you hung up your shingle in 2005.
Right, so let me back up. I first clerked for Mark Bennett,
Right.
and it was accidental. Like our career services had posted something. I think one of the Silvermans was hiring Jed, and he only did DWIs. And I wasn't interested in that, and he wasn't interested in me, and he said, I've got somebody for you. And so we walked next door to La Carafe, and here comes Mark Bennett in that fancy Mercedes and his sharkskin suit and his ponytail. I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, you look like a TV lawyer. Like, this is not... So I spent that summer clerking for Mark, and he did it all. Like, he was in federal court. I was reviewing a federal transcript with Candy Elizondo and all of David Byers, all these guys that I know now to be great lawyers. And then he was in state court, and it was just a lot of fun. It just looked like fun. I waitress bartended my way through undergrad, and I can't do a desk. That just wasn't in the cards for me. So watching Mark really lit the fire.
So you're in private practice, trying criminal cases.
Mm-hmm.
We tried a large number of cases.
Oh, you're skipping a chapter, Stanley.
Oh.
So as a baby lawyer, I'd heard of this legend named Stan Schneider, and I'd been introduced to him, I'm going to say, like a half a dozen times, if not a dozen times. Hi, Mr. Schneider, it's Casie Gotro. What's your name? Casie Gotro. Casie Gotro. I'm relentless. I knew that this was like, Stan was like the top. He was the best. And I want to try a case with you. So when are you going to let me try a case with you, Stanley? When are you going to let me try a case with you? And I caught him on the right day, and he said, boy, have I got a case for you. And that was Michelle Burnth.
Right.
And it was a 2-week dead baby trial in Belinda Hills courtroom. And I was scared shitless. And I didn't even have a huge part in the trial, but just watching you work was, I learned more in those 2 weeks than I did in 3 years of law school. Like just what the objections look like in the courtroom when you're supposed to. Like I could define hearsay, but really rubber hitting the road is watching you do it.
Well, that was 10 years ago?
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
It was a while ago.
It was a while ago, yes. We can agree to that. It was a while ago.
And then there was the Mongolia case.
Oh, the burnt vagina.
Yes.
The burnt vagina. Good. So, I think that between Michelle Burnth and where I am now, I always say that I was built by 3 lawyers, Stanley, and watching you in the courtroom, I remember early on too, you getting on my ass about me not reading enough. We were sitting in a cafe and you're smoking a cigar and I'd asked you a legal question and you shook your head because we talked about it before. And you were like, you need to read more. And that, not ugly way, but in that stern way of if you want to be good, you need to work harder, Casie. And you're just a machine. But that was a defining period for me. Those first half dozen trials that I had with you. I found my confidence. I found my voice. I learned to stop listening to the rabble and to keep my eye on the prize, and that is and always is the client.
Well, I know that you saved my ass in a case in the 262nd. It was
Charlie. No, Joseph. Joseph.
It was Bradley. No, it was Joseph. It was the manslaughter case where the client came over to judge.
Almagar.
Almagar.
That's right, because I'd say Almagar and you'd say Paroline, and I'm like, no, Almagar, and you said Paroline. This was a Supreme Court case, United States versus Doyle Paroline. Stanley, myself, and Buck Files went to Washington, D.C., and Stanley argued in front of the United States Supreme Court.
We're not talking about me.
I was there, though, and as a young lawyer, I mean, hell, what year was that,
2014.
14? I hadn't even been licensed 10 years. I'm in the Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor's over there, just watching, observing. Like, I was too afraid to even walk up and say hello to her.
Me too.
It was crazy. It was one of the neatest, coolest experiences I've had as a lawyer, and I wasn't even arguing. So, yes, it is my interview, but I went to the Supreme Court with Stanley.
Now, all right, so the reason we're here, this is not a background crap. The reason we're here is because of your trial in Waco, Texas, representing what your client...
His name is Jake Carazal.
All right. And you're representing Mr. Carazal on, what was he charged with?
So by the time we got to trial, he was charged with engaging in an organized criminal activity, 2 counts of that, one with the predicate of murder, one with the predicate of ag assault, deadly weapon, and then directing the activities of a criminal street gang, which is 25 to life.
And so, how many co-defendants were there?
None.
Well, how many other people were indicted out of the incident?
So 154 arrests. 154 indictments. And it got really fuzzy. I've learned a lot about the motorcycle community in Texas over this last year. And the Bandidos are the top 1% club in Texas, which means that if you are in a motorcycle club in Texas, you ride with the blessing of the Bandits, and you wear a support cookie, which is, the Bandits are red and gold, and the support cookie is just a circle that says support your local Bandidos. So although they tried to hold Jake responsible for other Bandidos, they were saying red and gold, that the criminal organization was red and gold, which was every motorcycle rider in the state of Texas.
Who was associated with the gang?
Not a gang, a club.
A club.
A club.
Club. So, 154 people are indicted.
Mhm.
177 are initially arrested.
Yes.
How'd you get involved?
So I had just moved back to Houston. I'd been in San Antonio for a year, sabbatical, like I was not taking any cases. Just a break for me. I'd been back in Houston maybe a week, and at the time, the national president of the Bandidos was Bill Sartell, and I'd met Bill early 2016. I think I'd gotten in a beauty pageant with Kent Schaefer to represent Mr. Pike when he got arrested. I lost the beauty pageant, but I was fine with that. I was just happy to be in the pageant. But I'd stayed in contact with Bill. We'd Facebook and stuff, and he reached out to me and he said, you know, I was impressed when I met you, and I got a guy that's in trouble in Waco, Casie. And I said, call me. So we get on the phone, and he said, look, if you want to make your motorcycle go faster, I know how to do that. And he's like, I got this lawyer talking to me, Casie, and I have no idea what he's saying. And so you have to know, the Bandidos have a legal defense fund, and it's not to fund or defend against criminal conduct. Is that if you are persecuted just because of your affiliation with the club, like Jake Carousel, that the Bandidos will pay for your attorney's fees. And they had been doing that. So Jake this is March of last year, Jake's set for trial. The week he's supposed to go to trial, his other lawyers demanded $150,000 from him so that he could hire another lawyer to try the case with him. And so as Bill Sartell is explaining this to me, and I can't, that's not going to happen on my watch. So I talked to Jake on the phone, and I agreed to go to Waco to appear on his behalf. I met him for dinner the night before to just stop the train. Like, wait a minute, Jake's not even seen the evidence, right? He's done no trial prep whatsoever. And fast forward several months later, when I moved to recuse my trial judge, the visiting judge observed that my predecessor had never been ready for trial a day in his life. We all know that's a fact. A sitting judge said that. And so that kind of affirmed what we knew, and that was that the state had chosen Jake's case to go first because of who his lawyer was. They were trying the lawyer and not the case.
Right.
Enter Casie Gotro, air brakes, whoa, like it took him 2 days to get a continuance, to try and file for a continuance.
So why did you file a motion to recuse? That appears, from everything I know very little about it, except for what the media tells me. Why did you file a motion to recuse? Because that's a very, unless you have a permanent motion to recuse, like I have in some courts, for judges that just absolutely hate me, filing a motion to recuse, if you don't kill the king, you're
Toast.
yeah. So why'd you do it?
I didn't have a choice. You know, when we were sitting in the banquet earlier, I realized that when we talk about fighting the good fight, my fights aren't with prosecutors. My fights are with judges. They really are. I think Botsford said that. And I know how to manage a cheating prosecutor, but I gotta have a judge that's gonna just enforce the law. And I'd seen what was clearly the judge taking his nods from the state, basically asking Mr. Jarrett, the prosecutor, what's the state's position? And without fail, ruling with the state.
But that's all judges.
No, it's not. It isn't.
Well,
It absolutely isn't.
Most judges.
We had a hearing, and I had filed, like, I think 9 subpoenas, 12, 9, something like that. And DPS didn't produce any documents. And so I asked for capias, because I'd subpoenaed the director of DPS to bring me these records. And without reading the subpoena or the few documents that had been produced, he denied my motion to enforce my subpoenas, not reading anything. And I was so confused, like, what the hell, what is happening? Just confused. And I remember walking out of the courtroom like, did that just fucking happen? Not even aware that my client's behind me, forgetting completely what it must feel like to be Jake, to watch his lawyer just get her teeth kicked in. And they would do this thing, Stan, during all of my pretrial hearings. The state would line the jury box with all these baby DAs, and they would literally laugh and cheer when the judge would make a joke at my expense, or Jarrett would say something at my expense. I mean, it was, you want to talk about being outnumbered? I asked for a copy of that transcript expedited, and when I read it, I was ashamed of myself.
Why?
Because I was all lost in legal land, and I got a man standing next to me that has put his life in my hands. And I let him down. And so I called him. I said, Jake, I'm going to apologize to you for letting that happen. It will not happen again. And I drafted an email to the state and to the judge. He wanted a jury questionnaire, and I said, you won't give me the tools to do my job? I can't put the questionnaire together. I'm going to move to have you recused from the bench. Watford read part of the recusal. I said, I've never filed 13 years of practice. I've never had to file one of these before, so I'm going to be very cautious and deliberate in compiling the motion. But no, I can't do anything else until and unless I get a trial judge, because effectively I don't have one, and Jake's entitled to one.
What was it? Who was this judge?
His name is Ralph Strother.
Right.
And for me, Stanley, that was a pivotal moment of, you're my target. I started wearing pants to the courtroom, which was, I shared this with Botsford. What I discovered about myself in Waco was that when I'm going to kick an anthill, I put pants on. I've never been as strident as I've had to be with this judge. My first appearance, he tried to bully me into picking a jury. I hadn't even read the indictment. And if I didn't know how to preserve error, like a lesser lawyer, Jake would be in prison right now. Just the number of times I caught him trying to bully me into doing things. At the end, I straight out told him, I don't believe you. I'm going to let you make a record, Miss Gotro. I don't believe you. Because he lied to me over and over again. And so that shit, Stanley, was standing Jake's shoes.
Who was the judge that heard the recusal?
I don't remember.
How long was that hearing?
A day. I got to testify. It turns out I'm a terrible witness.
You're a terrible witness?
Yes.
I could tell you, I could have guessed that.
I'm a terrible witness.
Who questioned you?
Oh, the state prosecutor.
They called you?
Oh, yeah.
And the recusal was granted?
Yep.
And you got a new judge?
I did.
Judge Johnson?
Mm-hmm.
And he's from Waco also?
Yep.
Did you move to recuse him also?
Initially, yeah. I discovered some things in the hearing from Strother's recusal hearing that facially could have applied to Johnson. And so we put on a couple of witnesses, and after that I was satisfied with what I'd seen, and I withdrew the motion. And
Okay.
the court, he was one of the fairest trials as far as balls and strikes go, next to Mark Brown. Just balls and strikes. He's a reading judge, would open the book and look at the rule and then rule. That's all I want. I don't need you to cut for me or against me. Just enforce.
There were several times where suppressed evidence was discovered during Jake's trial.
A couple times.
And did you ever ask for a mistrial argument?
Many. Well, I take that back. Not initially. So, I'd argued to Strother and to Johnson, like, constitutional rights are one big bouquet. You can't force him to choose between his constitutional right to all this evidence and his constitutional right to a speedy trial. It's not either or, it's both. And so, it became clear, and all this decision making was with Jake's consent and participation. It became clear to me we weren't going to get all the evidence prior to trial. Jake wanted his trial. And so, to some degree, I knew going in that this was going to be discussed. I was going to be doing like a deposition. Like, it was pretrial discovery in the middle of trial. So, probably the 6th or 7th time, when it got really egregious, I said to Judge Johnson, they're putting me in a position where I may have to ask for a mistrial. I don't throw that word around. And then by the end of the trial, yeah, I mean, probably one day I was having to move for a mistrial, because here we are again.
More evidence was suppressed.
Not a single state witness, save for the first girl who has PTSD and didn't see anything, could testify the same way. Not one of them. Based on what they turned over to me during and after trial.
How'd that feel?
How'd what feel?
being in a trial where you're learning that the state suppressed evidence all the way through it, that you're constantly on the defensive, not just being defending somebody, but being defensive in terms of preparation, allocution, trying to figure out what to do next on the fly.
So, I said earlier in this interview, Stanley, that you really helped me find my confidence in my voice. There are so many decisions that have to happen rapid fire. I was lucky to have Kevin and Thomas and Vivek around me. There was very little sleep. I had rented an Airbnb. We were all like right there at the courthouse. When I kept my attention on Jake, the only thing I felt was ire, was fury. That was it. It's almost blinding for me. Watching him say goodbye to his boys because he could go to prison for life. Not on my watch. Not like that.
So,
not like that.
I heard you say today that you chose to wear a red suit. Oh, by the way, I only wear blue suits, not black.
Me?
No, me. I only wear blue, not black.
I wear black.
So you decided to wear a red suit.
Mm-hmm.
Why? For those of you who aren't honest.
Because if I'd been in the parking lot of Twin Peaks that day and a cop had seen me wearing red, I could have gotten arrested. They are criminalizing colors, T-shirts, expressions.
And don't police do that every day with young people who are associated with gangs? Or young black persons wearing the colors of the Crips or the Bloods or whatever colors that. Isn't that something that we see happening every day in our criminal justice system?
I don't see that every day, but I will tell you a disturbing trend that I see right now, and is what's going on in the motorcycle community. The profiling. Cops are stopping motorcyclists, frisking them, taking their guns from them because they say you're a gang member and you can't own a gun. Who the fuck said you're a gang member? Who made that legal determination? Is it a violation of the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 14th Amendment? I mean, it's ongoing and it's selective. All these cop clubs, they don't call themselves gangs.
So you argued the case.
So I was making a point with my red suit. I'm a known associate. I wear my SYLB gear proudly. I have a bumper sticker on my car because I can and because I hope it pisses a cop off. I hope it gets me stopped. Search me. Take my gun.
So you wore the red suit to make a statement.
Yeah.
And use it as a prop in your final argument.
Mm-hmm.
And you became part of your prop.
Stanley, this was the first trial, the first one I've ever had, where by the end of it, everyone in the room was calling my client Jake. Not the defendant, not Mr. Carazal, Jake. Where's the judge where's Jake? Ms. Gotro, get your client. He's Jake. I'm Miss Gotro, he's Jake. The state on cross, he's Jake. We had humanized him, and I was super fortunate to have Jake as a client. You know, he's 38 years old, father of two, worked for the railway for 18 years since he graduated from high school, driving a locomotive. You know, they don't let just any slapdick drive a locomotive. So, random drug tests. He didn't drink, doesn't smoke, never been arrested.
So, the humanization of your client, do you think is that what saved him?
Yeah. So here's a nice bookend. I had a juror during voir dire say that on the questionnaire, is there any reason that you don't want to serve on this jury? Her name's Sonia, I'll call her. And she said, yeah, she was afraid of retaliation. So I bring her back and I ask her about that, and she was like, I think I watch too much TV. I don't know that I would be afraid of him. I think I was afraid of the Bandidos, but I don't know that I'd be afraid of him. I kept her. And she was the first person to call me after the mistrial.
Right.
Wanted me to hug Jake's mother for her and apologize to him that they weren't able to convince those other two knuckleheads to come back with not guilties.
So it was 10-2 for acquittal.
It was unanimous not guilty on the directing and 10-2 on the two engaging.
That's a remarkable verdict for that case.
I thought so. Conventional wisdom was we were going to get hammered. And I mean, you know what it's like when that jury's out. Just every knock, every bump, my stomach would just sink.
Was it overnight? 'Cause I know.
Oh yeah, I sequestered them. Lock them up.
Well, no, I know in Waco, they keep juries until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, trying to force a verdict.
Well, so we had a very. I've spoken with like at least half of the jury, and we had a very strong foreman who expressed, he was very articulate when he said, "I believe that we've reached an impasse, and that if we want to have any hope of reaching resolution, we need to break for the evening." So he did a very good job of explaining it to the judge in a way that, you know, and no, I sequestered.
Oh yeah, the sequester has to be done, but still, it was 16-hour deliberation over 3 days?
2.
2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then hung jury.
Mm-hmm. And look, when you see that photograph when we got the mistrial, we were all just assumed been a not guilty to me. It's also the first time I walked out of the courthouse with my client, and they didn't make him sign a reset. There was no reminder when your next trial setting is. There was no admonition about your bond conditions. It was just like, y'all have a good weekend. And it was to watch this whole town go from seeing a demon in Jake to calling him Jake. Little old ladies would come up to us on the sidewalk, and I want to hug you. They want to pet his beard. He did a really phenomenal job of sort of debunking some of the myths and mystery about Bandidos.
You debunked the mystery of Bandidos.
I had a lot to work with.
Yeah. I'm very proud of you, Casie. Congratulations on a well-deserved award and a fantastic verdict.
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you for having me.